and to culture wars. Yeah, I think people who try to wipe out history, and the Jacobins did it, and Stalin and all that, things, they want to wipe out things like statues even. They don't even know history, or they're scared of it, and they're often just pig ignorant and don't care even. I'll give you some examples, modern examples. In the US, in California, left-wing protesters this week tore down the statue of a saint, Junipero Serra. And in Portland, they pulled down not only the statue of former President Theodore Roosevelt, but of President Abraham Lincoln, who not only fought a war that ended slavery, he was assassinated for it. This is like barbarians tearing down civilization. Joining me is Rowan Dean, columnist, civilization expert, cultivated man, author, Renaissance man, editor of Spectator Australia, host of Outsiders on Sky News on Sundays at 9 p.m. I better stop there, Rowan. Now it's going to flog your book next, but honestly, the list of credentials is so long. Rowan, we get the same statue haters here in Australia, attacking statues of the great explorer and humanist James Cook, calling him an agent of genocide and all that. What do you make of this all?
Well, it's a result of the poor education that an entire generation have had for the last, for the last generation, really, 20, 30 years. If you only ever view everything through the one prism of kind of neo-marxism, identity politics, race, critical race theory, then you're going to view everything in history. And that is, unfortunately, such a narrow prism, it just doesn't do justice. You mentioned Theodore Roosevelt, for example. They would have gone, oh, he was a Republican, tear down the statue. But, of course, he was one of the most progressive presidents that the States has ever seen. He was the, if you like, the forerunner to Greta Thunberg. I mean, he toddled off to the Amazon. He was a great conservationist, save all the forests. He was also one of the first to propose the dole and welfare, which many of these activists who tear down statues rely on, I imagine, to feed themselves. So if you, unless you really study an individual's past and know your history, Andrew, you're going to be tearing them down using labels, and that really just shows the paucity of identity politics, because they don't go into any depth. It's just what's superficial, really, and that's the problem with it.
Yeah, of course, that's true, and I think, but I also think it's it's so easy for the stupid, basically. Most of the identity politics warriors are actually quite stupid, don't have much behind them, and because it's so easy, you just say black, that's good, and white, that's bad, and who needs to investigate anything? It was just so simple for them. It's a little, oh, that's bad, Yeah, that's right. So easy. In Britain, we see even columnists in the Guardian newspaper now saying statues of the great British naval hero Admiral Nelson should be pulled down, including Nelson's column in Trafalgar Square, because he supposedly defended slavery, and never mind that he saved the nation from Bonaparte. How well do these anti-Nelson types actually know their history?
Well, they don't at all, Andrew. It is true that Horatio Nelson did hate one race with a venom, and that was the French, and they were his sworn enemy, and he couldn't stand them, and he took a bullet in the end. One of them got him in the end. But the point about Nelson, they desperately want to tear down the famous statue in Trafalgar Square. There are others around Britain that they've tried to tear down, and it's all based, again, on a misreading of history. You had one letter that Nelson supposedly wrote at the time of Wilberforce, when there were the great debates about abolishing slavery, and they're the abolitionists, and a letter only 2 years after Nelson was shot, actually, as I said, by the French, a letter appeared
at the Battle of Trafalgar.
At Trafalgar. It appeared to have been written by Nelson to a slave owner, a plantation owner in the Caribbean. And this was touted in the British Parliament by the anti-abolitionists, saying, oh, well, look, even our great hero Nelson, he believed in slavery. But in fact, it's now turned out a historian, Britain, and it was simply because there are a couple of lines in this letter, Andrew, that said, oh, Wilberforce's idea is cruel and callous and something like that. But what it has now turned out Nelson was referring to was not slavery, but was referring to the practice that he had seen when he'd sailed through the Caribbean. When they liberated slave ships, they literally just dumped the slaves onto an island or a rocky outcrop, let them fend for themselves with all sorts of horrific humanitarian disasters. So Nelson was actually supporting, was actually criticising the behaviour of those who released slaves without caring for their welfare. But this was twisted, as is the case so often, out of context.
There you go.
And suddenly he becomes a supporter of slavery. The reality is quite the opposite.
Well, no one will want the reality. That's too hard. It's too brain-hurty. But speaking of the ignorant, Rowan, Paramount Pictures is making a new film about Cleopatra, the Queen of the Nile, lover of both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. There was a famous film about her starring Elizabeth Taylor, and this latest one is going to star another white actress, Israeli Gal Gadot. But social media is in an uproar. Identity warriors say this Egyptian queen should not be played by, Israeli, a sort of whitish Israeli Gadot, but by a black actress, or at least an Arab one, even though the Arabs didn't get to Egypt for 700 more years. German director Lexi Alexander, for instance, says we should cast someone like the 3D image they created based on a coin they found with Cleopatra on it, which means the part should go to a black actress. The bottom line is not white. Well, Rowan, here is one of Cleopatra's coins showing her Greek profile, or Macedonian. She was actually the descendant of one of Alexander the Great's Macedonian generals. And here is a bust of her made in her lifetime, showing she did not look African at all, not black African at any rate. What does all this tell you?
Well, again, identity politics always ends up eating its own. Poor old Gal Gadot, the Israeli actress, very beautiful woman, been Wonder Woman or something like that in all these superhero movies, recognised as one of the great beauties of the modern era. She's always done the identity politics thing, singing Imagine and expressing her care for everybody and making Zoom videos and things. So she's played it all right, but nah, they've come for her. So she's learnt the lesson that the left will always eat its own. But here's the irony in this whole thing. You mentioned the computer modelling. That should have been the giveaway, Andrew. The computer modelling of Cleopatra. We know that computer modelling has given us climate change, a complete hoax. We know that computer modelling gave us everything wrong about the pandemic. We now know that millions and millions would die, and that the Imperial College computer modelling has told us we now know that it was fraudulent, that what went into it was fraudulent. So the computer modelling of Cleopatra, like climate change, like COVID, is completely false. Cleopatra was not was Queen of Egypt, but she was not Egyptian, nor was she African, nor was she Arab. She was, as you said, from basically Macedonia, Armenia, Greece, that part of the world. So if you're going to cast someone who ethnically was the descendant of Cleopatra, you'd be better off casting Gladys Berejiklian than you would be casting Gal Gadot. And in fact, Gladys might actually be free for the work soon, so it'll probably be a perfect opportunity to grab her for the role. And the great thing about Cleopatra, and again the left have got it all wrong, the terrific thing about Cleopatra, and this is no disrespect to Gladys or Gal or anyone else, Cleopatra was not a great beauty. She was a great seducer of men, and particularly powerful men, through her understanding of languages, through her intelligence, through her education, which was second to none. And she managed to, if you like, she was the original psychiatrist or psychologist who worked out the best way to get the best out, or get her way with the most powerful men of her era. That's the story of Cleopatra.
Yep,
absolutely. A great political figure.
Would Shakespeare have been attracted to the story of Berejiklian and... No, don't go...
Gal Gadot, maybe Gal Gadot, I don't know. But the point is, here's a great feminist story to be told. The feminists are telling it, and they've started off on the wrong foot to begin with.
They stuffed it up. Yeah, but the thing is, the actress is Israeli.
So therefore they attack her.
On the wrong side of identity politics. Rowan, students, very quickly, only a minute left, but I've got to get to this. Students at a student at a Louisiana high school right near Franklinton. Well, all students there are allowed to paint their rented parking spots, and this guy painted a picture of Donald Trump on his. The school could not tolerate that, said it was too political, painted it over. I admire this kid because he fought back, didn't he?
He did. He took it to the local court, and the court decided that the school was wrong to have painted over and that he had done the correct thing. There's some little charity whereby you pay a bit of money and you're allowed to paint whatever you want on the car park. He did the right thing. The kid took it to the court forced the school to back down. But what a joke that you have this education system, the school itself decides, oh, we've got to paint over Trump. It's just it's so ridiculous what is going on, Andrew.
At least America has a constitutional right to free speech. I wouldn't trust Australia's human rights lawyer to write a right to free speech in our constitution now. You know what they'd do?
I agree with you.
They'd write out all the exceptions to it.
Exactly.
Rowan Dean, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.